Serena Bennett had been working at Bellavita for exactly 4 days when she accidentally gave away the most dangerous table in Chicago. She didn't know it was dangerous. To Serena, it was simply empty. And at 7:43 on a brutally busy Saturday evening, an empty table was exactly what she needed. The elderly man standing near the entrance was leaning heavily against his cane. His wife had one hand wrapped around his arm and the other clutching a tiny cream-colored purse. They had been waiting for almost 20 minutes. Their reservation had somehow disappeared. Every other table was occupied, and Victor Hale, Bellavita's general manager, was becoming increasingly desperate to make the problem disappear before the couple became visibly upset in front of the restaurant's wealthiest customers. Serena looked across the dining room. Then she saw it, table 7, beautiful, private, perfectly positioned near the windows, and completely empty. Serena made a decision. 5 minutes later, Arthur and Rose Miller were sitting comfortably at table 7, celebrating their 52nd wedding anniversary. Rose was smiling. Arthur had finally stopped leaning painfully on his cane, and Serena was pouring water into Rose's glass when the elderly woman reached up, touched her arm, and thanked her. Serena smiled. Then the waitress standing behind them nearly dropped an entire tray. Serena didn't notice. Rose was telling her about the first restaurant Arthur had taken her to 53 years earlier, and Serena was listening. The other waitress wasn't. She was staring toward the entrance. Her eyes widened, her mouth opened. One hand rose slowly toward her lips. Because Lorenzo DeLuca had just walked through the door, the restaurant changed. Not gradually, immediately. The hostess straightened. 2 businessmen at the bar stopped talking. Victor Hale turned toward the entrance, then toward table 7, then back toward the entrance. All the color left his face. Lorenzo DeLuca stood just inside the restaurant, wearing a black tailored suit over a black shirt. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair swept neatly back, a trimmed beard sharpening an already intimidating face. 2 men in black stood several steps behind him. They weren't friends. They weren't assistants. Nobody needed to ask what they were. Lorenzo looked toward his table and stopped. There were people sitting there. Victor moved so quickly toward him that he almost collided with a waiter. "Mr. DeLuca." Lorenzo didn't answer. His eyes remained on table 7, on Arthur, on Rose, and then on Serena. The new plus-size waitress was leaning slightly toward Rose, completely unaware that half the restaurant had stopped breathing. Lorenzo's expression gave away nothing. Victor began explaining. A reservation error, a new employee, a misunderstanding. He would have the table cleared immediately. That was when Lorenzo finally looked at him. Cleared. One word. Victor swallowed. He looked toward Arthur and Rose, then toward Serena. The other waitresses were already imagining the disaster. Serena was 4 days into the best-paying restaurant job she'd ever managed to land. And she had apparently just seated 2 strangers at a table nobody in Chicago was supposed to touch. Victor quietly explained that table 7 had been reserved permanently for Lorenzo for years. Lorenzo barely seemed to hear him, because Rose had just laughed at something Serena said. Arthur laughed too, and Serena looked pleased, simply because they were pleased. She still hadn't noticed Lorenzo. That interested him. Most people noticed Lorenzo DeLuca the second he entered a room. Sometimes before, his reputation tended to arrive first. Serena finally straightened. She picked up her tray, turned, and saw everyone staring. Her smile disappeared. Her eyes moved toward Victor, then toward the handsome stranger beside him, then toward the 2 bodyguards. Something inside Serena whispered, "Oh no." Victor beckoned her over. Serena looked once at the elderly couple. Then she walked toward what she was increasingly certain was the end of her employment. Victor leaned closer. "You gave away table 7. Serena blinked. "Yes, I can see that." His whisper somehow contained the frustration of a man reconsidering every decision that had brought him to this exact moment. Serena looked toward Lorenzo. Lorenzo looked back. Victor lowered his voice even further. "That is Mr. DeLuca's table." Serena waited. Victor stared at her. Apparently there was more. Then she understood. Not reserved for tonight. Not preferred. His. Serena slowly looked back at the elderly couple. Rose was fixing Arthur's napkin. Arthur was smiling at his wife. 52 years, one missing reservation, one painful knee, and apparently, one extremely dangerous seating arrangement. Serena looked at Victor. "I didn't know." Victor closed his eyes for half a second. Lorenzo still hadn't spoken. Then Serena asked the question that nearly finished Victor completely. "Can they finish dinner?" Victor's eyes opened. The waitress behind Serena froze. One of Lorenzo's bodyguards looked suspiciously like he had just swallowed a reaction. Lorenzo's eyebrow moved. Barely. Serena realized how that sounded, but she continued anyway. They were already seated. They were celebrating their anniversary. Arthur had difficulty standing. Moving them now would embarrass them in front of the entire restaurant. Serena wasn't challenging Lorenzo. She wasn't trying to be brave. She was simply explaining the problem as she saw it. Victor looked toward Lorenzo. So did everyone else. Lorenzo's eyes stayed on Serena. A long, quiet, uncomfortable moment passed. Then Lorenzo looked toward table 7. Rose was holding Arthur's hand across the white tablecloth. Lorenzo turned back. Let them finish. Victor almost asked him to repeat himself. He wisely didn't. Lorenzo removed his jacket, handed it to one of his men, then looked across the restaurant. There was a small table near the center of the room. Nothing special. No privacy. No prestigious view. Lorenzo pointed toward it. "I'll sit there." Victor stared. The bodyguards stared. 3 waiters stared. And Serena Bennett, who had been employed at Bellavita for approximately 96 hours, finally understood that she had done something much stranger than make a seating mistake. She had put Chicago's most feared Mafia boss at an ordinary table, and he had allowed it. Serena exhaled. "Thank you." Lorenzo looked at her. That tiny movement returned to the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile. "Don't thank me yet." Serena's stomach dropped. Lorenzo walked past her, then stopped. He looked at Victor. "When she's finished with their table," his gaze returned to Serena. "I want to speak with her." And just like that, Serena's relief disappeared, because apparently she wasn't fired. Yet, Serena spent the next 40 minutes attempting not to look at Lorenzo DeLuca. She failed approximately every 3 minutes, not because she was fascinated by him. At least, that was what she told herself. She simply wanted to know whether the man who owned the table she had accidentally donated for an anniversary dinner looked like he was planning her execution. So far, the evidence was inconclusive. Lorenzo sat at the ordinary table as though there was nothing ordinary about it. That was probably the irritating thing about extremely powerful men. Put them beside the kitchen door, and somehow the kitchen door became prestigious. His 2 bodyguards remained nearby. Victor personally took Lorenzo's order, which Serena found mildly ridiculous, considering Victor hadn't personally taken anyone's order in the 4 days she'd worked there. But Serena had bigger problems. Rose wanted dessert. Arthur claimed they didn't need dessert. Rose informed him that after 52 years of marriage, she had earned the right to ignore him. Serena liked Rose immediately. She arranged a small anniversary dessert through the kitchen. Nothing extravagant. A slice of chocolate cake, 2 forks, 1 candle. When Serena brought it over, Arthur looked embarrassed. Rose looked delighted. Then Arthur tried to read the tiny writing on the dessert menu and realized he'd left his glasses in the car. Serena quietly read the options to him. No performance. No exaggerated sweetness. She simply stood beside the table and helped. Across the room, Lorenzo watched. He had been trying not to. That annoyed him. There were more important things occupying his attention. Much more important things. Bellavita was one of several legitimate businesses operating under the DeLuca Group. The restaurant made money, excellent money. But Lorenzo hadn't built his reputation by obsessing over pasta margins and wine inventory. He owned shipping interests, construction companies, commercial property, private security firms, and several businesses whose ownership structures were complicated enough that government investigators had spent years trying to understand them. Bellavita was different, personal. His father had purchased the building decades earlier when the DeLuca family had considerably less money and considerably more enemies. Table 7 had become Lorenzo's table long before he inherited the restaurant. Everyone knew it, except apparently Serena Bennett. Lorenzo looked toward her again. She was laughing quietly with Rose. His phone vibrated. One of his men had sent a message. Lorenzo read it. His expression changed, only slightly. A financial irregularity had appeared in one of Bellavita's monthly reports. Nothing dramatic. A few $1,000s distributed across dozens of transactions. Small enough that most people would ignore it. Lorenzo didn't ignore money, especially when someone appeared to be hiding it from him. He put the phone down. At table 7, Arthur and Rose were preparing to leave. Serena helped Arthur stand. Rose hugged her. Serena clearly hadn't expected it. She laughed and returned the embrace. Then Arthur reached for his wallet. Serena shook her head. Lorenzo watched. The dessert wasn't on their bill. Interesting. The couple left. Serena stood beside the empty table 7 for a moment. Then she looked toward Lorenzo. He lifted one finger. "Come here." Serena considered pretending she hadn't seen it. That would probably be childish. Also, the entire staff was watching. She approached. Lorenzo waited until she stopped beside his table. Up close, Serena realized he was even more intimidating than he'd appeared from across the room. Not because he looked angry, because he didn't. His calmness seemed deliberate, the kind belonging to someone who rarely needed to raise his voice because other people already understood what happened when he became unhappy. Lorenzo asked how long she'd worked there. 4 days. Victor quietly supplied the exact number, as though presenting evidence in court. Lorenzo ignored him. He asked why she'd chosen table 7. Arthur was struggling to stand. The restaurant had lost their reservation. Every other appropriate table was occupied. Table 7 wasn't simple. Lorenzo asked whether she'd have seated them there if she'd known whose table it was. That question required more thought. Serena glanced toward the entrance where Arthur and Rose had disappeared. Then she admitted she probably would have asked first. Victor visibly relaxed. Then Serena added that if the answer had been no, she would have found another solution, rather than make an elderly couple stand around on their anniversary. Victor's relaxation died immediately. Lorenzo stared at her. Serena stared back. Then, something unexpected happened. Lorenzo smiled. Very slightly. It transformed his face just enough to be dangerous, for an entirely different reason. "Go back to work, Serena." She blinked. That was it? Apparently. Serena walked away. Victor remained. Lorenzo looked toward table 7. Then he asked for Arthur and Rose's bill. Victor retrieved it. Lorenzo studied the receipt. Dessert. 2 entrees. Wine. A service charge. Then something else. A small administrative charge coded beneath the meal. Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. What is this? Victor leaned closer. He didn't know. Lorenzo looked toward the register. Find out. That tiny charge, $27.40, would have meant absolutely nothing to most people. To Lorenzo, it was wrong, and wrong numbers had a way of leading to wrong people. Serena finished her shift shortly after midnight. Her feet hurt. Her hair had surrendered around 10:30, and she had learned 3 important things. First, expensive shoes did not make wealthy customers more patient. Second, Victor could appear behind an employee without making a sound, which Serena considered deeply unnatural. And third, Lorenzo DeLuca had not fired her. That third one felt worth celebrating. She collected her coat. Then another waitress, Nina, approached. Nina had been the woman covering her mouth in horror earlier. She stared at Serena. "You gave Lorenzo DeLuca's table away." Serena sighed. Apparently this would be her identity now. She had hoped for something more dignified. Nina explained that she'd worked at Bellavita for 5 years and had never seen anyone else sit at table 7 while Lorenzo was expected. Not once. Serena shrugged. The elderly couple needed it more. Nina looked at her, as though this reasoning was precisely why Serena was dangerous. Then Victor appeared. Serena braced herself. Instead of another lecture, he handed her a revised schedule. Serena looked at it. More shifts. Good shifts. She looked up. Victor looked mildly annoyed by his own explanation. "Mr. DeLuca said you're good with customers." Serena stared. Lorenzo had said that? Victor immediately ruined the moment by adding that this did not mean she could begin redistributing furniture according to personal preference. Serena promised to resist the urge. Victor walked away. Serena smiled. Then she noticed Lorenzo standing inside his private office across the restaurant. He was speaking with another man. Marco Rinaldi. Serena didn't know his name yet. She only noticed that Lorenzo wasn't smiling anymore, and whatever conversation was happening behind that glass door had nothing to do with restaurant tables. Serena returned Monday afternoon. Table 7 was empty. She checked it twice. Not because she was nervous, because she had developed what Nina called Table 7 trauma. At 5:30, Serena was arranging glasses when the front doors opened. Lorenzo entered. No reservation. Of course, Victor appeared, almost magically. Table 7 was prepared within seconds. Lorenzo looked at it, then looked across the room. Serena was standing in the section containing the ordinary table he'd used Saturday. Lorenzo walked toward it. Victor followed. "Sir, table 7 is ready."
"I can see that."
Lorenzo sat at the ordinary table. Victor looked personally betrayed. Serena turned away before anyone saw her smile. Nina did see. That was unfortunate. Within 30 seconds, Nina was whispering that Lorenzo had deliberately chosen Serena's section. Serena told her to stop. Nina absolutely did not stop. Serena approached Lorenzo. Professional smile, professional posture, professional voice. So professional that Lorenzo looked mildly entertained. He ordered dinner. Serena recommended something else. Lorenzo looked up. Apparently nobody usually corrected his order. Serena explained that the dish he selected was fine, but if he actually wanted the best thing the kitchen was serving that evening, he should choose something different. Lorenzo asked whether she always argued with customers. Serena informed him she preferred to think of it as preventing expensive disappointment. The corner of Lorenzo's mouth moved. He accepted her recommendation. It was excellent. He returned Wednesday, then Friday, then again the following week. Always the ordinary table, always Serena's section when possible. Bellavita's employees noticed. Victor noticed. Nina practically created a private investigation. Serena pretended not to. But Lorenzo wasn't simply coming to eat. The $27 charge from Arthur and Rose's bill had led somewhere. Lorenzo's accountants discovered similar charges scattered across hundreds of receipts. Tiny amounts, different codes, different dates. Then larger discrepancies appeared behind them. Refunds issued for customers who had never requested refunds. Cancelled reservations charged through secondary systems. Inventory purchases that existed on paper but never reached the kitchen. Someone had constructed a theft operation from thousands of transactions too small to attract attention individually. The total wasn't $27. It wasn't 27,000. It was approaching $500,000. Lorenzo said nothing. Yet, instead, he watched. That was what Lorenzo did best. He allowed people to believe he knew less than he did. People became careless around ignorance. And careless people eventually confessed, without opening their mouths. Marco Rinaldi had overseen several DeLuca businesses for nearly 9 years. Trusted, polished, reliable, which meant Lorenzo didn't accuse him. He investigated him, quietly. Serena knew none of this. She simply noticed that Marco seemed to be at Bellavita constantly. Sometimes after midnight, sometimes inside Victor's office, sometimes near the accounting room. One evening, Serena mentioned it casually while serving Lorenzo. She joked that Marco deserved employee benefits considering how often he appeared after closing. Lorenzo's fork stopped, just for a fraction of a second. Serena didn't notice. His bodyguard did. Lorenzo asked what she meant. Serena explained. She'd seen Marco leaving the accounting corridor twice after midnight, last Tuesday, and again Thursday. Lorenzo said nothing, because Marco had personally told him he'd been in Milwaukee on Thursday. Serena continued working. Lorenzo watched her leave, then looked toward his bodyguard. No command was necessary. The man already understood. Check the cameras. The footage changed everything. Marco had entered Bellavita at 12:14 a.m. He had remained inside for 47 minutes. Then he'd left carrying a folder. The following morning, 3 financial records had been altered. Lorenzo leaned back in his office chair. His expression became completely still. Betrayal was rarely dramatic in the beginning. Usually, it looked like paperwork. Meanwhile, something else was happening. Serena was getting comfortable around him. Not completely. There was still the inconvenient fact that Lorenzo DeLuca had 2 armed men following him into restaurants. But she stopped treating him as though one wrong word might result in her mysterious disappearance. Lorenzo preferred that. Serena made him laugh. Not deliberately. That was why it worked. One night, Lorenzo ordered coffee near closing. Serena looked at the clock, then at him, then at the coffee. Her expression said enough. Lorenzo asked what the problem was. Serena explained that drinking espresso at 11:45 at night suggested either terrible judgment or unresolved emotional issues. Lorenzo ordered it anyway. Serena brought decaf. He discovered this halfway through. She denied everything. Lorenzo stared at the cup, then at her. For perhaps the first time in years, one of his bodyguards had to look away to hide a smile. Serena survived. Barely, according to Nina. The attraction grew quietly, not through declarations, through familiarity. Lorenzo learned Serena hated olives. Serena learned Lorenzo disliked people touching his phone. He discovered she sent part of every paycheck to her younger sister. She discovered he always tipped kitchen staff separately from servers. He learned she dreamed of opening a small catering company one day, and unlike every wealthy man Serena had encountered who immediately tried to solve dreams with money, Lorenzo simply asked what kind of food she wanted to serve. That mattered, more than Serena wanted it to. Then, one Thursday night, everything changed. A customer at table 12 had been drinking too much. Serena brought the wrong bottle of wine, an ordinary mistake. She apologized immediately. The man didn't care. He began speaking to her as though she'd personally destroyed civilization. Serena remained professional. The man became crueler. Then he made a remark about her weight. Serena's face changed, only slightly, but Lorenzo heard it. The restaurant became very quiet when he stood. He didn't threaten the man, didn't shout. He simply informed Victor that the customer was finished for the evening. The man protested. Lorenzo looked at him once. The protest ended. Security escorted him out. Serena approached Lorenzo afterward. She wasn't grateful. Not exactly. She told him she could handle rude customers. Lorenzo agreed. He hadn't removed the man because Serena needed rescuing. He removed him because Bellavita didn't charge people hundreds of dollars for dinner and then allow them to purchase the right to humiliate employees. Serena stared at him. There was that distinction again. Protection without pity. She liked it. That was becoming a problem. A very handsome, very dangerous, extremely well-dressed problem. And Lorenzo knew it. By Serena's 4th week at Bellavita, Lorenzo stopped pretending his visits were entirely about the restaurant. He came because Serena was there. His bodyguards knew it. Victor knew it. Nina knew it so thoroughly that Serena threatened to start charging her for commentary. Even Marco noticed. And that was the problem. Lorenzo's investigation had tightened. He now knew money was disappearing. He knew Marco had lied. He knew somebody inside Bellavita was helping him. What Lorenzo didn't know was how far Marco was willing to go to protect himself. Serena became important at exactly the wrong time. She didn't realize it. She only knew Lorenzo's attention had become increasingly difficult to misunderstand. He never crossed professional boundaries while she worked, never demanded her number, never used ownership of the restaurant to corner her, but his eyes found her, constantly, and Serena found herself doing the same. One night after closing, Lorenzo found her sitting near the bar rubbing one ankle. Her shift had been brutal. She immediately straightened when she saw him. Lorenzo told her to relax. Serena informed him that was easy to say when he hadn't spent 8 hours wearing shoes apparently designed by a medieval torturer. Lorenzo looked at the shoes, then at her. He suggested different ones. Serena asked whether he'd like to explain that to Victor and his sacred dress code. Lorenzo owned the restaurant. Serena had temporarily forgotten this. The next afternoon, Victor announced that female servers could wear approved flat shoes. Nina nearly fell over laughing when Serena heard. Serena confronted Lorenzo. He claimed it was an operational improvement. She accused him of being smug. He didn't deny it. The humor between them made something dangerous feel ordinary. That was perhaps why Serena didn't see the real danger approaching. Friday night, she stayed late. A large private event had ended. Serena helped clear glassware while the kitchen closed. Around 12:30, she entered the supply corridor, looking for replacement napkins. Voices stopped her. Marco. Another man. Serena couldn't see the second person's face. Marco handed him an envelope. The man tucked it inside his jacket. Serena took one step backward. Her shoe squeaked. Marco turned. Their eyes met. The pleasant smile Serena usually saw disappeared. For 1 second, Marco looked like someone else entirely. Then the smile returned. Too quickly. Serena pretended she hadn't noticed anything. She collected the napkins, walked away, didn't run. Only when she reached the dining room did she breathe properly. Lorenzo wasn't there. Serena considered calling him, then stopped herself. Calling the owner of the restaurant after midnight, because she'd seen one employee give another an envelope, sounded ridiculous. She went home. The following morning, Lorenzo received a message from an unknown number. "Your new waitress is becoming a problem." Lorenzo read it twice. His expression didn't change. His bodyguard standing nearby saw something far worse than anger. Stillness. Lorenzo immediately called Bellavita. Serena wasn't scheduled until 4. He called his security team. By 4 o'clock, 2 plainclothes DeLuca men were inside the restaurant. Serena noticed them. She also noticed Lorenzo arriving 20 minutes later. He didn't sit. He asked her to come into his office. Serena's humor disappeared when she saw his face. Lorenzo asked whether anything unusual had happened the previous night. Serena hesitated, then told him about Marco, the envelope, the unknown man. Lorenzo listened. Every word confirmed something. He asked whether Marco had seen her. Yes. That single answer changed the room. Serena noticed. What is happening? Lorenzo looked at her. He could lie. For several seconds, he considered it, then decided Serena deserved better. Someone was stealing from Bellavita. Marco was involved, and Serena had accidentally witnessed something connected to it. She stared at him. The restaurant suddenly felt different. The corridors, the offices, the men in suits, the security cameras. Even Lorenzo. She'd known who he was. Of course she had. Everyone in Chicago had heard the DeLuca name. But knowing rumors and standing inside their consequences were different things. Serena asked whether she was in danger. Lorenzo didn't insult her with a lie. Possibly. Her stomach tightened. Lorenzo immediately offered paid leave. Serena refused. He expected that. She needed the money, and she wasn't allowing Marco Rinaldi to chase her away from a job she liked. Lorenzo argued once. Serena refused twice. Then Lorenzo did something his men weren't accustomed to seeing. He compromised. Security would remain nearby. Serena could work, but she would not leave alone after closing. Serena agreed reluctantly. Lorenzo watched her return to the dining room. Then his face changed. The softness disappeared. He turned toward his men. Marco had made a mistake. Stealing from Lorenzo was one thing. Threatening Serena was another. The investigation accelerated. Marco's theft was more sophisticated than Lorenzo originally believed. Cancelled reservations, fake refunds, altered invoices, ghost purchases. Everything was hidden inside ordinary restaurant activity. Then Serena noticed the pattern. She wasn't trying to investigate. She was trying to understand why Victor had become obsessed with checking cancelled reservations. Serena looked at several receipts. The strange charges appeared on tables that had supposedly remained empty. Then she remembered Arthur and Rose. Table 7, the mysterious charge. The night everything started. Serena told Lorenzo. He immediately pulled the records. There it was. Table 7 had been scheduled for a fraudulent transaction that Saturday. Because Lorenzo often arrived without formally booking, Marco could use the table number for fake transactions without another customer's receipt exposing them. Except Serena had seated real customers there. Arthur and Rose's legitimate bill had collided with Marco's fake transaction. $27.40. That tiny mistake had exposed $500,000. Lorenzo stared at Serena. Serena stared back. Then she said the obvious. So technically, giving away your table was helpful. Lorenzo's expression remained serious for 3 seconds. Then he laughed. A real laugh. Serena smiled. Even one of the guards failed to remain expressionless. The humor didn't last. Because Lorenzo realized something else. Marco hadn't begun watching Serena because Lorenzo liked her. He'd begun watching her because she had accidentally disrupted the scheme. Lorenzo's interest had simply made her even more valuable. Serena was now connected to both problems, evidence and Lorenzo. That night, Lorenzo increased security. Serena hated it, but she understood. Then Marco disappeared. His phone went dead. His apartment was empty, and one of Lorenzo's accountants vanished with him. The trap had been discovered. For 2 days, nothing happened. That was worse. Serena worked. Lorenzo watched. Security remained close. Life attempted to behave normally. Then Tuesday afternoon, the restaurant phone rang. Serena was polishing glasses. Victor answered. His expression changed. He called Serena over. Someone claiming to be from Northwestern Memorial Hospital said Serena's younger sister had been involved in an accident. Everything inside Serena stopped. She grabbed her phone. No answer from her sister. Again. Nothing. A vehicle was supposedly waiting outside to take her to the hospital. Serena forgot Lorenzo's instructions, forgot security, forgot everything except her sister. She rushed through the service entrance. A black SUV waited. The driver opened the rear door. Serena took 3 steps toward it, then stopped. Something was wrong. The vehicle had no hospital markings. The driver wasn't wearing identification. And why would a hospital send a private SUV? Serena backed away. The man's face changed. Another man emerged from behind the vehicle. Serena turned. She ran. She made it 6 feet. A hand caught her arm. Serena screamed. She kicked backward, connected with someone's knee. The man cursed. Serena grabbed the doorframe. Another hand pulled her away. Her bracelet snapped. Tiny burgundy beads scattered across the pavement. One rolled beneath a delivery cart. Then Serena disappeared into the vehicle. The SUV drove away. Her phone remained inside Bellavita. Lorenzo arrived 11 minutes later. He knew before anyone told him. Serena's section was unattended. Her apron lay near the service station. Victor was pale. Security was shouting into phones. Lorenzo walked toward them. His voice was quiet. "Where is Serena?" Nobody answered quickly enough. That was when Lorenzo saw the bracelet. He bent, picked up one burgundy bead, and something inside Chicago's coldest mafia boss became very, very still. Lorenzo did not shout. That frightened everyone more. Within 4 minutes, Bellavita was locked down. Within 7, security footage showed the vehicle. Within 12, Lorenzo had the plate. Fake. Within 18, he had the route. Marco had planned carefully, but he had underestimated one thing. Lorenzo DeLuca had spent his entire adult life preparing for enemies to move against him. Cameras covered streets people didn't know. DeLuca businesses owned. Security companies Lorenzo controlled monitored garages Marco believed were private. And the money Marco had stolen left traces. Tiny ones. But Lorenzo understood tiny traces. After all, $27.40 had started this entire war. The SUV appeared on traffic footage, heading toward an industrial district. One of Marco's shell companies owned a warehouse there. Lorenzo stood. His bodyguards followed. Victor asked what he should tell the police. Lorenzo looked at him. Nothing yet. Then he left. Serena woke with her wrists restrained. Her head hurt, but she was conscious. That mattered. She looked around. Warehouse. Concrete floor. Old machinery. 2 men nearby. Marco several yards away. Serena didn't cry, not because she wasn't terrified. She was. But fear could happen later. Right now, she needed information. Doors, windows, people, distance, anything useful. Marco approached. He tried to reassure her. That almost made Serena laugh. Being kidnapped was already unpleasant. Being reassured by the kidnapper felt insulting. Marco told her she wasn't going to be hurt. Serena didn't believe him. He needed Lorenzo to negotiate. That was when Serena understood. This wasn't only about what she'd seen. It was about Lorenzo. Marco had noticed. Everyone had. Lorenzo came for her shifts. Sat in her section. Changed restaurant policy because her feet hurt. Removed customers who disrespected her. Watched her. Marco had turned affection into leverage. Serena hated that. Not Lorenzo. The idea that something tender could be converted into a weapon. She began working at the restraint around her wrist. Slowly, carefully, Marco continued making calls. Serena listened. A dock. Money. A vehicle. A departure before sunrise. Useful. Her right hand began slipping free. One of the guards approached. Serena stopped moving. He walked away. She continued. Minutes passed. Then, outside, a vehicle door closed. Marco froze. Another. Then silence. The warehouse lights went out. Darkness. Serena's heart slammed against her ribs. Marco shouted. Someone answered from outside. Not loudly. Serena recognized the voice. Lorenzo. She almost laughed from relief. Almost. Then chaos erupted. Men moved. Commands echoed. A door crashed open. Serena pulled her hand free. She dropped behind the chair. Something shattered nearby. Footsteps. A man approached. Serena grabbed the metal leg of a broken stool and swung. The man went down with a howl. Serena stared at him. Well, that worked. Not the time. Definitely not the time. She ran. A figure appeared. Serena raised the metal again. Serena. She stopped. Lorenzo. He crossed the distance. His eyes moved over her quickly. Face, arms, wrists, blood, injuries. He didn't touch her immediately. That detail almost broke her. Even now, he waited. Serena closed the distance herself. Lorenzo wrapped his arms around her. For several seconds, the warehouse disappeared. No mafia, no stolen money, no bodyguards, no restaurant. Just Serena, breathing against Lorenzo's chest, and Lorenzo, holding the woman he'd spent weeks pretending wasn't becoming essential to him. Then he released her carefully. His men took Serena outside. Marco's betrayal ended that night. Not dramatically, not publicly, quietly. Accounts frozen, associates identified, evidence secured. Every person involved removed from DeLuca businesses. Marco had believed stealing $500,000 was his greatest mistake. It wasn't. His greatest mistake was giving Lorenzo a reason to stop being patient. Serena returned home before sunrise. Lorenzo stayed outside her apartment. He didn't assume he was invited in. Serena noticed. She turned. He looked exhausted. For the first time since meeting him. Lorenzo DeLuca looked human. Not weak, human. Serena asked whether it was over. Yes. She believed him. Then Lorenzo said something she wasn't expecting. She didn't have to return to Bellavita. Her job would remain available. Her wages would continue until she decided. If she wanted another position elsewhere, Lorenzo would provide a reference and nothing more. If she never wanted to see him again, he would understand. Serena stared. The man everyone described as controlling was giving her every possible exit, because Lorenzo understood something now. Protection without choice became a cage, and he would rather Serena leave freely than stay because she felt trapped. Serena didn't answer. Not yet. She went inside. Lorenzo stood outside for several seconds, then walked away. For the first time since Serena entered his life, he didn't follow. Serena stayed away from Bellavita for 6 days. 6 very long days. The restaurant continued. Customers arrived. Food was served. Table 7 remained empty. Lorenzo visited twice. Both times, he sat at the ordinary table, alone. Nina noticed. Of course Nina noticed. Nina noticed everything. Victor noticed too. Nobody commented. Lorenzo didn't call Serena, didn't send flowers, didn't send jewelry, didn't send some ridiculous car with a ribbon on it. Serena appreciated that. She also found it incredibly annoying. By day 4, she caught herself checking her phone, then became irritated with herself for checking. By day 5, her sister told her she was behaving like someone waiting for a man she claimed she didn't want to call. Serena denied this, poorly. The truth was simpler. She missed him. Not Lorenzo DeLuca the name, not the money, not the restaurant owner, not the man whose bodyguards could make an entire room reconsider its life choices. She missed the man who drank espresso too late at night. The man who quietly changed a shoe policy instead of buying her expensive shoes. The man who listened when she spoke about catering. The man who understood she didn't need him to fight every battle for her. The man who had looked at an elderly couple sitting at his table and decided their dignity mattered more than his privilege. Serena realized she had spent 6 days trying to separate Lorenzo from his world. She couldn't. They were connected. Loving him would never be simple. But simple had never been the same thing as worthwhile. On the 7th evening, Serena put on her burgundy uniform, then reconsidered. She wasn't going back to work tonight. She changed. Bellavita was busy when she entered. Nina saw her first. Her reaction was so dramatic that Serena immediately regretted giving the woman access to her personal life. Victor appeared next. He looked relieved, then pointed toward the dining room. Serena followed his gaze. Lorenzo was there. Ordinary table, alone. Serena walked toward him. Lorenzo looked up. For once, the man who always knew what to say said nothing. Serena sat opposite him. Lorenzo's eyes moved to the empty chair she'd chosen, then back to her. Serena told him she wasn't quitting. Lorenzo nodded. She was still angry. Another nod. She was still frightened by parts of his life. Lorenzo understood, and if he ever sent somebody to secretly follow her without telling her, she would personally give table 7 to a children's birthday party. That finally did it. Lorenzo laughed. Serena smiled. The tension broke. Then Lorenzo reached across the table. He stopped halfway. Serena looked at his hand, then placed hers inside it. That was the beginning. Not a perfect ending, a beginning. 3 months passed. Serena remained at Bellavita while quietly developing her catering plans. Lorenzo offered advice when she asked. Only when she asked. He discovered this distinction was essential to continued survival. Serena eventually learned exactly how extensive Lorenzo's businesses were. Some parts made her uncomfortable. Some created arguments. They learned each other gradually. Lorenzo learned that Serena became very quiet when genuinely angry. Serena learned that Lorenzo became excessively polite when he knew he was wrong. This was useful information. Nina learned absolutely everything, because boundaries meant nothing to Nina. Victor developed a permanent expression of resignation. And Table 7. Table 7 became a joke between them. Until one evening. Arthur and Rose returned. Serena spotted them at the entrance. Rose waved. Arthur lifted his cane in greeting. Serena hurried over. Their 53rd anniversary. This time, their reservation existed. Victor had personally checked it 3 times. Then twice more, because apparently trauma had lasting effects. Unfortunately, the restaurant was packed. Their assigned table wasn't ready. Serena looked across the dining room. Lorenzo was sitting at table 7. Their eyes met. Serena didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Lorenzo looked toward Arthur, then Rose, then at his dinner. He stood. Victor saw him. For one horrible second, the manager probably thought history was repeating itself. It was, only differently. Lorenzo walked toward Arthur and Rose. He greeted them personally, then offered them table 7. Rose recognized him. Her eyes widened. Arthur looked toward Serena, then toward Lorenzo. Understanding slowly appeared. The elderly couple accepted. Lorenzo walked toward Serena. She folded her arms. "Where are you going to sit?" Lorenzo looked toward the ordinary table, the one he'd chosen that first night. 2 chairs. Serena smiled. They sat together. Across the restaurant, Arthur raised his wine glass toward them. Lorenzo returned the gesture. Serena looked around Bellavita, at the chandeliers, the waiters, the customers, the table she'd accidentally given away months earlier. Then at Lorenzo. It was strange. One tiny act of kindness, one missing reservation, one empty table. $27.40. Any one of those things could have gone differently. And if they had, perhaps Serena Bennett and Lorenzo DeLuca would have remained strangers. But life rarely announces which small decisions will become important. Sometimes, you simply see an elderly man struggling to stand and decide an empty table should be used. 6 months later, Serena's catering company handled its first major event. A charity dinner, 200 guests, a kitchen full of controlled panic. Serena moved through it all, with the confidence Lorenzo had noticed before she knew he was watching. He arrived late, black suit, 2 bodyguards. The familiar reaction followed him through the room. Heads turned, people whispered. Serena didn't. She was arguing with a tray of desserts. Lorenzo approached. Serena looked up. "You're late." 3 people nearby nearly stopped breathing. Lorenzo checked his watch. 7 minutes. Late. 1 bodyguard looked away. Lorenzo smiled. Serena handed him a tray. "Make yourself useful." The room collectively discovered a new level of shock. Chicago's feared Lorenzo DeLuca, holding miniature cheesecakes. He looked down at the tray. Then at Serena. Serena was already gone. Lorenzo followed. And perhaps that was the strangest transformation of all. For years, people had followed Lorenzo, waited for Lorenzo, moved when Lorenzo entered rooms, adjusted themselves around Lorenzo. Serena never had. She simply made space for him beside her, and expected him to decide whether he wanted to occupy it. He always did. Later that evening, after the final guest had gone, Serena stood in the empty ballroom, exhausted, happy. Lorenzo approached from behind. He told her the event had been successful. Serena corrected him. It had been very successful. Lorenzo accepted the correction. She smiled. Then he handed her something. Not jewelry, not money. A small brass plaque. Serena looked down. Table 7. She laughed. Lorenzo had removed the old plaque from Bellavita after replacing the tables during renovations. Serena turned it over. Something had been engraved on the back. A date. The night they'd met. Serena's smile faded into something softer. Lorenzo told her he'd spent years believing Table 7 mattered because it represented permanence. His father had sat there. Then Lorenzo. Nobody touched it. Nobody changed it. Nobody questioned it. Then Serena arrived, gave it away within 4 days, and somehow improved everything. Serena looked at him. Lorenzo stepped closer. No bodyguards now. No restaurant employees watching. No frightened manager. No Marco. No danger. Just them. He told her that before Serena, his life had been built around people knowing what belonged to him. Businesses, properties, tables, territory, power. Serena had taught him something he hadn't expected. The most important things couldn't be owned that way. They had to choose you back. Serena's eyes softened. She reached for his hand, and she chose him. Again. A year after Serena Bennett accidentally gave away the most dangerous table in Chicago, Bellavita hosted another anniversary dinner. Arthur and Rose. 53 years had become 54. They arrived early. Victor had their reservation. Of course he did. He had checked it approximately enough times to qualify as a medical condition. Rose asked for Serena. Serena appeared from the private dining room. She no longer worked regular shifts. Her catering company had grown quickly. But Bellavita remained special. Home, in a strange way. Lorenzo appeared behind her. Rose smiled immediately. Arthur shook Lorenzo's hand. Then Victor led them toward their table. Table 7. Permanently reserved. But no longer for Lorenzo. A tiny brass plaque now sat on it. Arthur and Rose. Anniversaries only. Serena had cried when Lorenzo installed it, then denied crying. Lorenzo had wisely preserved his own safety by agreeing. Arthur pulled Rose's chair out. She sat. 54 years, and he still did it. Serena watched them. Lorenzo watched Serena. Then she felt his hand settle gently against hers. She looked up. A year earlier, Serena had been the nervous new plus-size waitress who thought she was about to lose her job. Lorenzo had been the terrifying Mafia boss, asking to speak with her. Neither had known that Table 7 would expose a thief, that Serena would become a target, that Lorenzo would discover something more frightening than betrayal, having someone he couldn't bear to lose, or that Serena would eventually discover something underneath Lorenzo's frightening reputation that very few people were ever permitted to see, a man capable of listening, changing, waiting, and loving, without turning love into ownership. Arthur and Rose raised their glasses. Serena smiled. Lorenzo looked toward the ordinary table where he'd sat the night they met. It was empty. He nodded toward it. Serena understood immediately. They walked over, sat opposite each other. And Serena laughed when Lorenzo pulled out her chair, because some stories begin with fireworks, some begin with a kiss, some begin when two people collide dramatically in the rain. Theirs began because an elderly couple needed somewhere to sit, and Serena Bennett saw an empty table. She didn't know whose it was. She didn't know the man walking through the door would change her life. She didn't know that a tiny charge buried inside a dinner receipt would expose a betrayal. And she certainly didn't know that the terrifying man everyone expected to throw the elderly couple out would instead give up his own seat. But perhaps that was why it worked. Serena hadn't been trying to impress Lorenzo DeLuca. Lorenzo hadn't been looking for love. Neither had been searching for the other. They simply happened to meet at the exact moment kindness became more important than status, and Lorenzo never forgot that. Because on the night everyone else in Bellavita was terrified of disappointing the most powerful man in the room, Serena had been more concerned about embarrassing two elderly strangers. That was the first thing Lorenzo noticed about her. Long before attraction, long before danger, long before love, her kindness. And it remained the thing he loved most. Serena reached across the ordinary table. Lorenzo took her hand. Table 7 remained several yards away, occupied by Arthur and Rose, exactly as it should be. And for Lorenzo DeLuca, the man who once had a table nobody else in Chicago dared touch, there was nowhere else he would rather sit. If Serena and Lorenzo's story kept you watching until the very end, show some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to Mafia Meets Curves for more powerful mafia romance stories, filled with danger, passion, and unexpected love. And before you go, drop your country or city in the comments. I'd love to see where everyone is watching from.